Welcome to Uncancelled Faith, a podcast that strives to break the culture of division which so often separates Christians from one another. I'm your host, Hannah Rose Russell, and I'm so excited to have you here today. This podcast is an Inspired Truth production and aims to create a safe space for people to bring new perspectives on topics that are frequently controversial or fall victim to cancel culture. Through thought-provoking conversations, we will challenge the norms, embrace God's unique calling on our lives, and find unity in our shared love for the Messiah. So grab yourself a drink and pull up a chair, because Uncancelled Faith starts now. Today, I am honored to introduce you to Caroline George, the multi-award-winning young adult author of Dearest, Josephine, and The Summer We Forgot. I've been a fan of Caroline's for some time and cannot tell you how long I have waited to finally connect and have this conversation with her. She is an incredible writer who isn't afraid to be vulnerable on social media, especially during the newest season of her life, which I'm excited to discuss with her today. So Caroline, welcome to Uncancelled Faith. How are you?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me. And it's so nice to finally, meet you through the screen.
Yeah, for sure. We've been connected for a few years, but we've never actually talked. And I've loved watching your many adventures and your beautiful photographs and words. So to have this time, it's the highlight of my week, probably month or year.
Well, thank you.
So for those who might not be familiar with you, can you tell us a bit about yourself, where you're from, and how you came to faith in Jesus?
Yeah, so my name is Caroline George, and I'm the author of Dearest, Josephine, and The Summer We Forgot, both published with Thomas Nelson HarperCollins. I currently reside in a little tiny town in Wyoming, but I'm originally from Georgia. And I guess just a quick little bit about me. So I was born and raised in Georgia. I went to school in Nashville, Tennessee at Belmont University. I have worn many different hats in publishing, and now I work for a ranch. But when it comes to my faith journey, I became a Christian when I was 5-6 years old. I remember the exact pajamas I was wearing when I asked Jesus to be my Lord and Savior. But I would say that my real relationship with him didn't really start until middle school, because I knew about God, but it wasn't until I was really being bullied in middle school and I felt totally alone. And I remember the exact place I was walking outside of my school and I was like, God, I feel so alone. And I remember the Lord telling me, well, you have me. And it kind of began this journey where God became real for me. And I think that in everyone's faith journey, there has to be a point where it's real to them, where it's more than just something you hear on a Sunday morning. And so that kind of began my relationship. I was raised in the church. My mom was in ministry. And so I saw religion, but it wasn't until middle and high school that my journey really became that relationship. And so, I found a church that I liked and kind of started walking with the Lord more intentionally, I would say then. And then in college, that's when, I think it became even more vibrant of a relationship. But that's a little bit about my journey, and it's still going. It's still going. I feel like I learn a little bit more every single day. But to be where I'm at now, where I just really see, I think the big thing I'm learning is that God is kind, and that, God offers grace, and that, that not all lessons are painful. And I think that coming out of a hard season, how I viewed God was very different than how I'm viewing him now, because I think he's showing me just how kind he is. And so I'm just really soaking all that in. But yeah, that's a comprehensive overview of who I am, I guess.
No, I love that. I have a similar story. I was about 5 or 6 like you. I don't remember the PJs I was wearing, but my parents had just put me to bed, and I came down, and I think my aunt, who isn't a believer, was there at the house, and I just said, I want to ask Jesus into my heart. And my mom's like, oh, you're just trying to get out of going to bed, go back to bed. And my dad's like, I'll come up. And so we prayed together. But then
you're just trying to get out of going to bed.
Yeah, that was my aunt. She's like, oh no, you're just trying to get out of bed. And then she goes, okay, no, Dad, go up and pray with her. So that happened. But then, like you said, you get to know religion, But then it's not until you learn relationship with God that faith really, really grows. And so that was, for me, probably 18 was a big turning point where it became solidified and was like, okay, this is serious. It's either follow God with all your heart or follow your own heart for your own destructive ways. So I'm very grateful I chose the right path.
Yeah, I love it.
So you graduated from Belmont University, like you said, and you got to have a degree in publishing and public relations. So you've always wanted to work in the publishing industry, but did you always dream of being a published author?
Well, I started telling stories before I could even hold a crayon. My mom, I would tell stories to my mom. She'd write them down for me and I would illustrate them. I was a voracious reader when I was younger. Like I mean, I could read a book easy in the day. Like I was flying through books. And so there was always this dream of being a writer, being an author. I think at one point my dad tried to convince me to be a lawyer when I was a little kid, like, because he was like, oh, you like Nancy Drew, you should be a lawyer. But there was always this dream to be an author. And when I was in middle school, I really got into writing fan fiction. And like I kind of said before, middle school was a really hard time for me. And I think in a lot of ways, God used writing to save my life in a lot of ways. And so I kind of used writing to escape. And I wrote Chronicles of Narnia fan fiction. That was my thing.
Okay.
I was really popular in school, obviously. And the funniest thing was I was the main character. I was Queen Caroline, the Courageous. It's okay. I can talk about it now.
No, but I love that. It's so cool.
So I used to post it on a little teen writing website, my little fan fiction. And I had 60,000 weekly readers of my Chronicles of Narnia, Queen Caroline fan fiction. So of course, knowing nothing about publishing, I just assumed I would publish my Narnia fan fiction and become a best-selling author and retire by 25 in a beach house. And that was going to be my life. Well, no. But I had a English teacher who I'm still best friends with, who I saw potential in me and was like, hey, why don't you try writing your own original book? And which was so sweet of her. And I think part of it was she saw potential, but also another part where she was like, don't please stop writing this Chronicles of Narnia fan fiction. But the summer between my 8th and 9th grade year, I started working on an original book. It was terrible, but I wrote the second one. And at that point, I just fell in love with writing and writing my own stuff. And I had always written my own short stories, but to complete an original novel, for me, I was writing, that's when I was really writing for me and just for my own enjoyment. But the second book in the series ended up being the first one that I self-published. But I tried to get traditionally published. I reached out to literary agents and everyone said I was too young. And to be honest, nowadays, that's not really the case. People don't really care about age. It's more about, quality of work. But at the time, that's just part of my story. I had people just tell me, oh, you have potential, but come back to us in 10 years and we'll see how you do. But I was stubborn and really felt a deep calling that I knew I was supposed to be a storyteller. And so I started looking into self-publishing. And this is before Kindle Unlimited was on the scene, before CreateSpace was on the scene, before really any self-publishing options were available. Ebooks were brand new to the market, and everyone was freaking out, thinking that every brick and mortar store was going to go under, and books like hardback books were going to go extinct. Everyone in publishing was panicking. But the very first ebook I ever read was eBooks for Dummies. I downloaded it onto my dad's iPad, and I learned step by step, how to edit a book, how to format a book, how to code it, how to upload it into different distributors' websites. I mean, because it was very, you had to do things. It was a lot more technical than it is now. And did I do everything right? Definitely not. Made a lot of mistakes. I did not hire a professional editor. I had my English teacher and several teachers help edit it, and that was pretty much my process. Instead of hiring a cover designer, I hired a photographer and had full out cover shoots for these books. I mean, it was fun, but I pretty much did everything wrong. But it did teach me how to develop a thicker skin, how to advocate for myself and for my stories, like how to see it more as a business. And it's really cool how God connects everything, because in college, it was my self-publishing background that landed me some pretty big internships, because it was still so new. And so it all connected. But I guess that's a really long answer to tell you, yeah, pretty much as long as I can remember, writing stories and being able to share them has been the dream.
I think so many people don't realize how thick of a skin you need to be an author, and it is a big trial and error thing. I'm nervous about that because I'm working on my debut novel, and I'm like, I know I don't have the thickest skin, but I need it for this. But then I'm also trusting in God. So it's that perseverance that you need to keep going, because is in your blood. So you have to go for it, because there's too many people out there saying, oh, it's such a competitive field. You're never going to get known. It's never going to happen. Your chances are 1 in a million. And that's not, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to.
It doesn't. No, it doesn't. And this was something one of my friend's moms told me. She said, someone has to do it, so why can't that person be you? Mm-hmm. And that always stuck with me, because I'm like, you know what? Why can't it be me? And even if it isn't in the way that I'm expecting, it's one of those things where it's like, I think a lot of publishing is just managing expectations, because and going into it with the right intentions. Because I think if we approach it of like, okay, I want this book to sell this amount of copies, I want to get this level of exposure. If it doesn't hit these points, then it's failure. When in reality, you're like, okay, they're privileged to tell this story, and for someone to read it, that's a success. However many people who read it, that's a success because the book was meant to reach them, and so I think it's like managing those expectations, celebrating those little milestones. And I think when it comes to publishing, it's easy to see it as all these finish lines of being like, okay, I will be happy when I can get here, or when I can get here. And the truth is, there's never really a finish line, because the moment you get to that point, you've already figured out what your next finish line is going to be. And it becomes this rat race, and exhausting if you're constantly measuring yourself, weighing yourself against others, or weighing yourself against your own expectations. And so I found that any way I can to kind of break it down and not put so much pressure on it, to not, put these unattainable goals on it, really helps. But yeah, thick skin, it's art. Art's subjective. You could have a bunch of people look at a Picasso painting. Half the people would say they like it. The other half might say, or like a portion might say they hate it. Then you might have a portion that just simply doesn't get it. And it's the same thing with the book. So just because you get a bad review doesn't mean the book's bad. It just means it wasn't for that person. And books are mirrors. They reflect us. We take from them what we bring to them. And so, sometimes it just doesn't resonate with certain people, but that's okay.
Yeah, it totally is. And if we think about it, I'm sure it's a saying, and I'm pretty sure it's not a Bible verse, but it's like, if you can minister to even one person, then the work will be worth it. And that's kind of what we need to understand. I think we live in a time where we want to hit the bestseller list, or we want to be able to make a full living off of the craft that we do. But at the end of the day, God's called us to do it not for the money, but for his glory and to serve others. So to be able to do that, and then to be content in that and not have that higher expectation, I think that definitely helps. So then when you do reach that goal, it's just as a surprise and blessing to you. Like, and also, isn't it Picasso, or there's so many artists who during their lifetimes, their work was hated by everyone. They didn't make any money off it, and then they die, and it's now worth millions or billions of dollars.
That tends to be the trend. That really seems to be the trend.
Yeah. So don't worry if you're not known in your time, because
just wait till you're dead.
You can go on someone's tombstone. Check me out at this website a few years from now.
Hashtag @author.
Yes. This day and age, yeah. So what is the writing process like for you? Does it differ from each book? Because your books are so different from one another.
I would definitely say that they're different for every single book. I would say that at the beginning, a lot of my outlining looks about the same, I would say, because I'm given only a handful of months to write a book, and so it's like you gotta hit the ground running. And so so most of my outlines are about 30 pages long. I mean, I'll start with, okay, what is a one sentence elevator pitch for this story? How can I condense it into one sentence? And then I expand on that. Okay, how would I condense it into 2-3 sentences? And then so on. But I think the big thing that I like to start with, even beyond that, is figuring out, okay, what is my why? Like, I'm a why person. I have to know the reason I'm doing something, because I found that if a book doesn't have a core message that I believe in, then it becomes a lot easier to walk away from it.
Yeah.
And so pinpointing that, okay, what is this book really about? Why am I writing it? What's going to be the takeaway? What are my core themes? And then figuring that out and then working the plot from that tends to really help. But I like to describe my outlining process like throwing a rock into a pond. You throw a rock, you have that initial strike point, and then it ripples out. And that's kind of how I like to outline. I like to create that initial impact, and slowly start building from there. And so that's how the outlines end up being 30 pages long. But I find that if I do a lot of that legwork up front, do a lot of my research up front, then it at least smooths out the process to an extent. And the first drafts are usually coherent and they're somewhat decent because of that legwork. But beyond that, I would say that each process is different. I mean, every book has tested me in different ways. I mean, with Dearest, Josephine, when Thomas Nelson picked that book, they picked it out of, it was about 13 concepts that I pitched them, and they picked that one. And at the time, it had been an adult romance book that I had converted to YA. And I was like, this is too weird. No one's going to go for this. Like, it's too abstract. And so when they went for it, that was the first time I had ever written third person professionally, like to be published. And so learning that voice, like trying to view the story is almost like a play, to where a lot of action's happening off the page, to where it's like a lot of it's happening like off scene. And I mean, it was a very different thing to figure out and to balance. Okay, I need to figure out how to capture a Regency tone while also still feeling modern, or at least relatable to the modern reader. So that was super interesting. And then with The Summer We Forgot, it was like, okay, let's strip back this voice and try to make it really contemporary, really YA. And now we're almost doing this mystery that's like, the summer camp, almost CW network kind of story.
Yep.
So it was a super different process. And also mapping out a mystery like that, like a murder mystery, is it's a lot harder than I think people think, just because you have to know the ending, but then figure out how to sprinkle clues and lead readers off track enough to where every single chapter you need to pinpoint, okay, who do I want the reader to suspect in this chapter? And so, that whole process. I mean, that one was difficult because I wrote the first draft and then worked with my editor, and then we kind of changed some foundational things, and then I rewrote it. And so that's kind of what that process looked like. But with Curses and Other Buried Things, I would say that this book is the most me out of any books I've written. I feel like I didn't have to try to alter my voice or get into character. I felt like in a lot of ways the characters told me who they were, and it flowed naturally. And so much of it, it's about 85% really personal stuff that, I've novelized and fictionalized and all of that. But so to be able to bring all of that together, it was I feel like a natural thing. And during the editing process, I think the biggest things were figuring out, okay, how do we make this best for fiction? So certain names spellings were changed. There were certain things that were altered away from, I guess, the real life narrative, or like the factual narrative, just to make it easier to read and digest. But every outline is the commonality, but I feel like once I get into the writing, especially the editing, that's where things start to diverge and look a little differently.
Do you think your internships with publishings and even working at publishing houses helped with that, because you saw how other authors were submitting their books?
So I worked on the marketing side.
Okay.
So when it comes to acquisitions, I didn't really have a handle on that. But I will say, I think that, we're doing the self-publishing stuff in high school and then going to school for publishing and having these internships. It really taught me the business itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like a lot of aspiring authors and writers approach the industry as, okay, I have this piece of art that I want to share with people, help me share it, instead of, okay, I've created this art, but now it's a product, and how do I sell this product and advocate for myself and be a good business person, within this industry. And there's a switch. And because, with art, it's really personal. But when it becomes a product, you kind of switch gears and you're like, okay, how do I be strategic about this? How do I partner with others? You become a lot more collaborative when you view it that way. So I think working in publishing taught me that aspect of it, but then also just the public relations and marketing side of, okay, we have this book, now how do we sell it? Because, if I want to write more books, I have to be able to sell my previous book, So I think the internships definitely helped me with that. And also just to know the process of, how to pitch, or what's actually selling, and that kind of stuff. So I think it helped with the business side for sure.
And it's definitely been a reward. I mean, your books were you expecting them to be as popular as they are?
I love that you think they're popular. That's so nice. Thank you. I see. I think, again, success is so subjective, and I'm very, very grateful for where I'm at. And I think for me, there's been a lot of like measuring expectations. But the hard thing is when it comes to books, it's hard to know their reach. I mean, I get a quarterly report of how many books have been purchased. But even from that, I mean, that doesn't even tell you how many people have actually read the book or how far it's gone. And not everyone who reads the book posts about it on social media or leaves a review. And, it's hard to gauge its reach. And, when it comes to like awards and accolades, I think all authors want these like accolades. But I mean, publishing it is a quiet industry. And, for all the hoopla that you might see on social media, I mean, really, it's really quiet. And you never really know a book's reach. So I'm grateful that you think that they're super popular. I will say I'm super blessed by every single reader who's picked up the book and every reader who's posted about it or has emailed me, because that's been really encouraging and kind of affirmed that I was supposed to write those books.
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got fan art being made for Dearest Josephine. I love it. And there was like costumes. People are dressing up in costumes. Oh, yeah. And it's
that was pretty cool. That was cool. I was like, that's something I never would have expected. I think it was Victoria on Instagram. She made these costumes and did this whole like cosplay. And I think that was one thing I'm like, I never even put that on my author bucket list, but now it's there. Now I can put a check. So that was just so sweet. Just the community has been amazing to see people's response, and to see the book means so much to certain people. I don't think I could have ever fully hoped for that. It's been really cool.
Well, you talk about writing being a quiet process, but you certainly make it loud. I mean, when you were writing The Summer We Forgot, you were in Hawaii and your pictures were incredible, but I know that it wasn't all clear waters and tropical weather, was it?
No, but the thing is, it was one of those situations to where I didn't even know my roommate at the time. So I worked at the guest services desk at my church, and I, on Sunday mornings, I just volunteered. That was my little spot. But I met a lady through there, and she and I became friends, and she told me, oh, my daughter is, still in college, but she wants to go live in Hawaii for the summer. You should go with her, because, I mean, she knew that I worked remote. So it was super easy for me to just kind of grab my laptop and go wherever. And I was like, okay, sure, thinking nothing of it. I was like, no, like I can't afford this. I'm trying to live off an author salary. Like that's not going to happen. But her daughter ended up calling me the next day. And like, I did not know her. Did not know her from Adam. I mean, I think we had met maybe once. Yeah, I think we met once. But she called me and she was like, you know, I know you said that she's like, would you be open to going? And I was like, okay, let me think about it. And so I thought about it for a second and I started texting a response to tell her, no, this is not smart. But I was with my youngest sister at the time. And my sister looks at me and she was like, why would you say no? Like, why wouldn't you go? And I thought about it for a second and I'm like, you know what? You're right. Like, why would I say no? And so I crunched the numbers and I kind of made a list. And I was like, okay, God, if you want me to go, these are some things that I need taken care of. I was like, I need to be able to, you know, this is my budget for it. This is what I need, blah, blah, blah. Within 2 hours, everything was fixed and solved and in order. And within 2 hours, I was going to Hawaii. So it's kind of crazy how it came to be. And I think it was just another thing of learning to say yes to opportunities, getting in the, like before, I think a lot of times we instinctually want to say no to things. Like it's just our first reaction, you know, we're just like, oh, I'm good, or no thanks, or that's not practical. And we move on, where I think I'm learning to be in the habit of letting my first instinct to be to say yes, but then holding myself back and be like, okay, let me make sure this makes sense. But I think that I want my first reaction to always be, okay, cool opportunity. Let's say yes, but then let's figure this out, you know? But yeah, we lived in a 1-room studio apartment. We were paying out the nose for it. It was infested with cockroaches. And every morning it was called Whack-A-Roach. That was the game we invented. So my roommate, her name's Mabry, but she would turn on the light and you would just see the cockroaches scatter and she would be screaming. And then I would get up and just start hitting as many cockroaches as I could. We also found out that you really need to store even your dry goods inside of the refrigerator. Because there was one morning I opened a box. So I think it was like Triscuits, like little crackers. And I reached in, ate a Triscuit, and then all of a sudden a roach crawled out of the box. And I'm like, and I mean, we were paying so much money for this place, but Hawaii is just expensive. But we would work. Because my roommate, she was working a job that was based on the East Coast, or maybe it was Utah time. It might have been Mountain time. Anyway, we would have to wait. We would start work at 4 a.m., work until around noon, and noon, 2, something like that. And then we would eat lunch and then go to the beach. So we went to bed super early. We ate a lot of rice and ground beef because it was the cheaper thing to eat. But beyond all of those little things, it was really a beautiful time for me, just in the sense of I was very much at peace, and I liked the sand and going to the ocean. And Mabry and I ended up becoming super close friends because we were pretty much bonded at the hip for the whole time we were there. I mean, I thought maybe we would go and meet other people, and we ended up kind of being on our own. And so I think the longest time we were apart was our flight back to the mainland. So that was, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss you so much. I'm like so used to having you everywhere. But yeah, it was really special. And editing the book there, at least having the beach around, I think it made it even more fun to write.
It added to the feel because the Summer We Forgot is based in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, so you could have the water and you could be going to and just have the Outer Banks feel, even though you're in Hawaii.
Yeah.
But I love what you said about just being able to say yes instead of no immediately. Mm-hmm. I did that last year, I guess, when Kyle Young, because you're part of his literary agency, and he's got a Serious Writers literary agency and website, and so they did a Italy writers retreat, and they broadcasted it, I think, back in May or June or something last year, and it came up on my feed, and I'm like, that would be fun to go to. nah, I can't afford it. There's no way I could go. So I, like you, immediately just was like, no, that's not going to happen. And just throughout the day, God nudged me and was like, no, put your name down. And he just provided for me in ways you wouldn't imagine. And I was able to live out some incredible bucket lists and dreams of mine going to Italy. I spent an extra week there, and I'm obsessed with Letters to Juliet, the movie.
Oh, yeah, I love that movie.
So I went to Verona and Siena and followed in the footsteps of Sophie and like taking pictures. I went to the resort they stayed at and got a tour and took pictures of the hotel rooms. I loved it.
I love it. That's amazing.
It was so embarrassing, but I don't care because it was
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's like you with your fan fiction.
No, I think yours is a little much cooler than my fan fiction for sure.
Letters is very popular and gets
popular
made out of it sometimes.
Yeah, well, Verona, I've never been. It looks amazing, and I do love Letters to Juliet, so I don't blame you.
It's beautiful. Verona is a must go. So most of us only catch a glimpse of what a life as a published author looks like, but you aren't shy of sharing the ups and downs. So what have you experienced or learned through these years of being from an indie author to being in internships and then published?
Well, publishing is a business. And I think that is an important thing to know, is that even though publishing professionals love books and, they're in their job because they love books, at the end of the day, it does boil down to numbers. And I think that as an author, it's like you don't always think about that. I mean, in a publishing house, every single author is allotted a marketing budget, but the author will not know that marketing budget. So it can be anything between no money whatsoever and hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on your publisher. And, the author doesn't know. It's the publisher deciding which author they think is going to sell the best. And then they put money with that. And so it really is a money game. And I think that that's like kind of a hard pill to swallow sometimes, in publishing, is that you might not get that big budget, that the publisher really decides how they're going to position your book. And I've learned too that publishers in a lot of ways determine the success of the book. Like if you're with a really big publisher that's decided your book is going to be this like front list, big seller, they're going to put a bunch of money throw a bunch of money at it. They're going to be able to get it placement, in different bookstores. They're going to be able to secure just media coverage and all those different things. Pre-orders, they'll be able to secure pre-orders, and then the book's a New York Times bestseller. And it's really not about the success of the book per se. It's more about the publisher's strategy leading up to it. And so yeah, I think like navigating that and realizing that no matter what I do, I personally cannot guarantee the success of the book. That, I can work really, really hard and sell copies and promote myself and all those things, but my efforts are more of a support than they are kind of that frontlining endeavors, So I think that's been a big thing to learn, but the industry is really quiet. At least for me, like my experiences, I've enjoyed working with my team for sure. But I think that when I first came into signing like a 3-book deal with Harper, that I was expecting it to feel like this, constant things happening. I have this team of people, they're going to be messaging me every week. We're all this big team player. And really, like, I might hear from them maybe once a month. Like it's a really quiet situation. And in a lot of ways, I feel, even though I know there's a team out there who's working kind of on the back end of the book, it still feels like a very individual experience. So that's been, I think, a learning curve for sure. And I think too, when it comes to trying to make writing a full-time job, I always thought, okay, if someone can do it, why can't that person be me? Surely it can happen. I'm like, I've learned this industry backwards and forwards. Like, I know that people are getting these 6-figure advances. Like, surely I can make this work. And, I had family members tell me, there's no way this is going to happen for you. Like, go get a real job. And I was living off my author advance and was broke, to be perfectly honest. I was like living in my family's basement for the majority of that time and working from a dining room table and getting by, but barely, because I was like determined that, I was on the rise. I was a starving artist, and I was grateful to even have that job. So, I was trying to get as much out of it as I could. And it's cool that I'm on this podcast with you, because this is the first time that I'm really actually, I guess, saying all of this, because I think for the longest time I thought, okay, if people found out how hard it was, then they would think I was a failure in a lot of ways. And so now I don't care. Now, as you can tell with what's going on here, like I just really am at that place where it's like, whatever, I'm just a lot more open. But I just thought, I had people tell me, oh, you can't make being an author a full-time gig unless you're married. And then I had people who were like, look at all these other authors, especially the females, married, because they're like, financially, it makes sense. Even if you're a big author, I mean, you get paid in chunks. So like, you might get a huge check, but that has to last you until your next big check. And so they're like, oh, financially, you're not going to be able to figure that out. Or they're like, you'll, be a teacher, or you need to have this other gig to support being a full-time author. And so I was just like, no, I feel called to this. God's going to make a way. And in my eyes, how I saw him making a way looked a certain way, instead of me being open to it. And I just thought, anything other than being a novelist was failure to me, because that had been a lifelong dream. I mean, since I was a little kid, that was the end goal for me. And so even the thought of doing anything else gave me intense anxiety. I mean, it was hard. But I will say that it is hard. I think the industry is not set up for authors to make it their full-time gig, which is unfortunate, because authors put in so much time, work, effort. They juggle multiple things when it comes to publishing a book. And so I think that if the industry, even if it was set up more as a staff writer kind of position, to where authors were on payroll and like they were, it was set up to where it was more stable, like I think that would help creatives as a whole. But I mean, the industry, it's just not set up that way. And so, yes, there are authors who are able to do it. And I am so happy for the people who are able to get to that point. And maybe I'll get there one day too. But I've reached a point now in my life where I'm like, okay, I think I have to be more open-handed to the blessings that God might want to give me. And, storytelling can look so many different ways. Writing can look so many different ways, and not now doesn't mean not never. And so I think that flexibility in my current season has been really helpful. But yeah, that's a short, I guess that would be considered a short overview of some of the things that I've learned about publishing and all of this.
Yeah, but it is so freeing once we finally let go and let God, because like you said, our callings, we could get to a point where we're like, nothing else matters unless this is my goal. This is what I need to do. Everything else, it can't happen another way. This is how I'm focusing on it. And then it's only when we let go and we're like, okay, God, just take it and have your hands open, that you see the callings and the gifts make way for themselves.
Yeah, I think an abundance mindset is really important. But I think to have that, we have to have open hands. And being where I'm at now, working a job that I actually believe in and is so fun. I mean, I see how, in a way, it's freed me up, because I think when my life revolved around publishing, when I was, so dependent on that next check and to be able to just even feed, pay my bills, to feed myself. And it was like success. Like that's all I could see, anything other authors did, I would be like, okay, I'm happy for them. But then I'd feel this like pit in my stomach of like, oh, I have to do more if I want to go anywhere. And it was like this striving, and it was exhausting.
I was about to say, it's exhausting.
And, and then I was like, well, I need to be better. And then it became this performance cycle. And so now to be in a place where, like, I have a book coming out in October, but I'm so much more open-handed with it, where I'm like, for me to put a pin in my novelist journey right now, I mean, I'm super proud that this is the book that I'm pausing on, because I think this is the best thing that I've ever written, or the thing that I'm most proud of. And but knowing that's coming out in October, I'm doing what I can do to promote on my end, or to, to be a support for my publisher. But also I'm a lot more open-handed, because for me, it's not, publishing isn't everything. And it was. And a couple, even just months ago, it was. And so to even see that, and to see, okay, I had some unhealthy patterns. So much of my emotions was tied to this. Now I'm a lot more steady, because my emotions aren't tied to the outcome, or even my well-being isn't tied to the outcome of this book. And so now, in the job that I have now, I work for a ranch out here, and, I'm their content marketing manager. So really, they brought me in to tell their story. And so, I write for them now. And is it a novel? No, but they're to be able to kind of to look at it more as a story of okay, how do I communicate this? And even beyond that, just to live life. I think, even when after Dearest Josephine, when I was committed to living my own story and not looking at fiction as a crutch or using it to escape, I still think that when publishing was everything, when stories was everything, I was spending 8 to 12 hours every day writing a novel, which was amazing, and I loved it. But also there were times where I was I'm spending all my life right now in these four walls, and even when I wasn't writing, I was thinking about fiction. There was not this clear unplugging. I would go for walks and be thinking, okay, how do I plot this? And again, I think that my time writing is not over. I will 100% write another book. I know that that's still in the cards for me, but to take a step back and to actually feel like I'm living my own story, I don't think I've ever felt more present than I do in this season, because I'm not thinking about where I want to go next, because I'm actually very content here. I'm not thinking about the next book I want to write, or, what's happening in this fictional world that I'm working on. I'm able to actually just be here and focus on life and meeting new people, and just living my own story. And it's been crazy, because once I started seeing my own life as a story, I start to see the plots. I've actually, I guess I'll tell you, because, it's us and I guess whoever's listening, but I've started working on, it's just right now a really rough sketch, but I'm calling it the Frontier Year. And it's just, I'm kind of just doing a quick little journal entry of every single day for this first year that I'm out here. And I'm doing it for me, but I've had a lot of people already reach out and be like, we want a book about what's going on in your life right now. So maybe we'll go there. But even just journaling and doing those things every day, I'm starting to see all the different plots going on in my own life, and the book worthy aspects of what's going on. And so if anything, it's giving me an appreciation for what I'm actually experiencing. And just my storyteller heart is, happy with it. But yeah, that's kind of, I think just having that abundance mindset and being open-handed is really important. And understanding that if God's hey, not now, that's not a no. And just settling in that, I think a lot of it's just settling and making camp in the seasons that God presents us with.
That's so important what you just said about it's, even if it's a no, it doesn't mean not now. And you're ministering to me, because I think it was a devotional, or someone said it to me, and it really caught me off guard, because they said, your calling is not your identity. And I was hang on a minute. No, God's called me to be a writer. I am nothing unless I'm writing. That's what I was feeling. And then I just sat in it. And the more I was sitting, I was like, wow, I have to let this go, because it's not true. You are a child of God. You are his. Your identity's in him, not the calling that you've been given. And so to do that, it doesn't mean you have to be hustling for your calling all the time in order to solidify your identity or prove that you are worthy to God.
And I think too, when it comes to calling, I thought my calling was being an author, being a full-time author. But then as I started shifting gears a couple months ago, I was okay, I think I need to dissect this. What is actually the calling? Is it to be a full-time author? And then I started cutting it up, and I was I think I'm a storyteller, that I have the storyteller heart. God's wired me that way, but that can be used and help people in so many other ways. And I was like, okay, I'm a communicator. I love relationships. I love people. And I was like, okay, let's break this up. And I'm like, if this is more so the calling or even the identity of like, I'm a child of God, but also he's wired me for these things, I can be active and functioning in those things in so many different ways. And once I got to the root of it, I was like, that actually makes a lot more sense to me. And that's something that can, last a lot longer. And so, yeah, I think that for me too, it was the kind of that dissecting of like, okay, I feel this calling to write, but beyond that, I'm like, this calling is to communicate and to be a storyteller and to use words to help people. And I think too, like with my social media, kind of coming into this new season, I'm like, okay, to publish my work, it might not have to be on paper. Like maybe I can just share my experiences or share my story through this channel that is already there. And so I was like, maybe this can be part of the creative outlet, is I can post pictures or talk about my experiences out here and see where it goes. And, even being in the space of being like, okay, I actually have the capacity now to just be creative for the sake of being creative. So I've picked up my guitar, and I haven't done that in a really long time. Or, I picked up, I've like dabbled in, I've started picking up poetry again and like writing just little things that I wanted to write that people might never see, but to be able to just explore that, it's been really, really great. So yeah, I think separating calling from identity is important. And then looking at calling and then pinpointing the roots of that is really helpful too.
Yeah, I like that because we don't do it. And imagine how freeing it is that you're now able to do that stuff and there's no pressure. It's the pressure cooker when we think that everyone's watching, that we have to live up to expectations, we have to meet quotes, we have to meet contracts and all that stuff. And when that's all gone, how much better it actually turns out. And
yeah, right. That's the hard thing too. It's like, okay, I have these 3 books with a big publisher. I was like, I see all these other authors, they're always posting about their next like deal and what's coming up next. And I'm like, I don't have anything coming up next. I need that if I want to keep going. And what if people find out the truth of like how hard it was? What if people find out that, I was living in my parents' basement for a while, and traveling and doing cool stuff, sure. But feeling that constant anxiety of like, what's after this? Will God provide? Like, and, being afraid of people knowing that. And, now to be on the side of like, okay, I'm not working on another book right now. Like I'm completely open-handed. I have a job that I really like, and I work with some awesome people, and I love this town, and I'm learning new skills. And I mean, I've been moving cattle and like have been on horseback and have been learning about ranching and just being in a completely new environment, and how helpful that has been. And so I'm calling this it's my frontier year, but it's also I'm living in, my whole goal is to live in freedom. I was like, freedom from shame, freedom from the hustle, freedom from, anything that I'm bringing in with me. I'm like, I just want to live in the open, and I don't want to feel like I have to filter myself. And I even think in publishing, and just a little side note, I guess, but I feel like in publishing, there are things I can't say. Like there are topics I can't talk about. There are things I can't say. And I think even too, I mean, I write for a Christian publisher, but they publish secular work. So, I mean, I write secular books. Like my books aren't technically Christian, like they're considered clean, but I wouldn't consider myself like a Christian fiction author. I mean, I'm a Christian who writes books, but I mean, it's a difference. And so even too on social media, it's like, okay, well, be careful. Like you can talk about your faith, but like be careful how much you talk about it, because then people are going to put you in this Christian box. And some of my books, a lot of Christians don't like, because they're like, this is, their idea of clean, it looks a little different. So, I mean, I've had people come at me. Like I've actually had a lot of Christians come at me, like more than like the secular industry, of people be like, you're leading people astray, or like, you're not a real Christian, or, people really come at me because of my books. And my books are clean by industry standards, but because of, other people's convictions, which I respect, they've come at me. And so it's like, it's created this like, oh my goodness, I have to really hold my tongue, or, I don't want people to put me in these boxes, or I want people to, not think that I don't want people to think that I'm more successful than I am, but I was like, I don't want people to think I'm a failure. And then to enter the season of like, you know what? I don't even care. I don't even care anymore. People can like my book or they can dislike my book. Doesn't really matter. People can think I'm a success, or they can, whatever because at the end of the day, I'm not doing it for them. And, and also at the end of the day, I know that the books are reaching who they need to. And anytime I get a message from someone who is like, your book was exactly what I needed to hear, I'm like, okay, well then it was for you. It was for you. And so that was a long monologue to just, I guess, and simply encourage you and anyone else who's listening to live in the open, to not be afraid of what other people are going to think or say, to not be afraid of whether or not how you're living is measuring up to your own expectations, to really just like to walk by calling and trust that, God is abundant and he gives good gifts. And sometimes that's one of the hardest things to swallow, is that God can just simply be kind, and pain doesn't always lead to more pain, and that, there can be good things even in that disappointment. So yeah, there's my monologue.
I love your monologues. Keep them coming. Actually, you said in a recent post, I mean, you didn't say it exactly, but I can't remember which one it was, but you said letting go isn't the same as giving up. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was so profound, because we often think, oh, we are not doing this anymore, so I'm a failure, I've given up. But then we realize there's multiple seasons of our lives, and God often pulls us away to either train us or give us rest, and that's okay. We do not have to hustle every single day of our lives. And I like what one of my favorite nonfiction authors, Jordan Rayner, says. He says, we will always die with unfinished symphonies. We will never accomplish everything, and that's okay. But it's getting to that, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think too, God is a good storyteller, and every single thing in our life has a purpose. Even if it doesn't feel like it is, it all connects. I look back at my life and I just see, I'm like, what things that didn't seem to make sense, like God has brought them all together. I mean, I never thought I would have ended up here in Wyoming. I actually met Jessica Jackson. Like, she's her whole family has adopted me out here, and I'm obsessed with them, and I love them so much. But I met her through a writing conference, and because I was called, like, they had me come out here to work and teach at a conference, and then they invited me back the next year, and Jessica and I had become friends, and she was like, oh, come, like, I live 2 hours away on my ranch, like my family they manage an 80,000 acre grazing association out here. And she was like, come see it. Like, my husband, he manages this property. Like, he's a cowboy, like, come see. And I'm from Georgia. So, I grew up around cattle farms, but ranching was a new thing. So I said yes, thinking, oh, it's a quirky time. Again, the power of saying yes. And I came out here and completely changed my life. Like, this, I've never been so possessed by a place. Like, I came here and I was like, I have to be here. Like, I just knew. And so I kept coming out, and every single time God was like it was such an intense, like, draw that every time I wasn't here, it was like almost ruminating of like, I have to be there. I have to be there. And, but I would not have even come out here if it wasn't for writing. And I would not have gotten the job I have now if it wasn't for my storytelling background. And so it's like realizing that even if God shifts our course, that the past season is there was a purpose for our past season into our next season, no matter what that looks like. But so God is super intentional. But I think when it comes to letting go, I went skydiving a couple months ago. It was a Christmas gift that I was given. I did not willingly buy that for myself. And I'm not a scared person. Like, I will, like, I'm very much a, I'll try it, kind of person. But that gave me pause. I was a little nervous. And so I went to the skydiving place, and I had barely slept the night before, because I'm just like thinking about falling out of an airplane. But once I got up into that plane and I'm tied to this little Puerto Rican woman named Kathy, and she's like walking me through what's about to happen. And she has the straps so tight, like I can just feel her body just like against me, and, felt at peace. And the door, opens to the plane, and I look out, and it was just kind of this whelp, this is happening kind of like thought, but it was also this, okay, like I'm surrendering to the journey. Like what's going to happen is going to happen. And I just have to trust the person connected to me. Like I have to trust the person who's going to be pulling the chute. And at this point, the only thing I have to do is just let go and just go with it. And I think in a lot of ways, it just taught me too, that we have to trust the person connected to us. And I think letting go is simply like surrendering to that process of being like, okay, I really don't have any control in the situation. So the only thing I can do is just trust and just let go and just fall. And I think that just that mindset of like, okay, I'm letting go, but I'm not giving up was a huge shift for me of like, okay, I'm letting go of my expectations. I'm letting go of what I think this should look like. I'm letting go of the stories I still want to tell and putting a pin in that for now. And then like on the other side of that, there's rest and there's freedom and there's adventure and there's adrenaline. Like if you're thinking still about falling out of a plane, there's so much more on the other side of that, because God wants to give us more, but he can't give us more when we're doing this. Yeah, we have to be doing this. Wow. So yeah, that's that whole, I guess, talk on that topic.
Girl, you are sprouting wisdom with this call. My word.
Hey,
you need like wisdom talk or something.
Wisdom is gleaned from hard stuff. So like, with any wisdom I can give, it's because it's from learning. And so I think too, it's like, I think from pain and through hardship, like that's where we learn so much. And a lot of that can be a spring for other people, so we just have to kind of reframe it in our heads of like, okay, I'm going to let what's like the pain for me have purpose, and power and for other people. And so I think there's a shift, but yeah, any wisdom I can offer, just know that there's been a lot of hard lessons, a lot of tears, a lot of process.
That is the hard thing about learning, is it often comes with a big like pull or tug. It's like, it's a whole stretching thing. I think my last guest, Ballet Magnificat, talked about was it's the stretching spiritually and physically that really gets you. Has there been a specific Bible verse or passage that is carrying you in this new season?
I would say this was actually a verse that I heard. Actually, it was probably weeks before I even got this new job, and before, or even I can't remember. I think it was like when I was in this process, but it's Psalm 90. I think it's Psalm 90:15. It's Moses' psalm. And he's like, Lord, for all the years that we have been in affliction, like give us back those years, for all the years we've been in sadness, give us back these years. And then it says like, bless the work of our hands. And I think that has been kind of my prayer over this season of the last 5 years. I mean, I graduated college at 20. I couldn't even legally rent a car, and then all of a sudden I'm in this adult world and trying to navigate this, and then trying to like do the book thing. And then I was a literary agent for a little while, and I was a conference speaker for a while, and, navigating this, and then moving back to my little hometown and feeling this intense isolation. I mean, there were a lot of beautiful, amazing things that have happened in like the last 5 years, but there's also this like deep uncertainty, this unsettled feeling, like this sense that I couldn't just rest and be at peace. I didn't have a space that was really mine. I had so many questions, and I didn't have a lot of friends at the beginning. And by the time I left my hometown, like God had built a community for me, and that was really hard to leave them. But, to be in this space of just being like, no matter all the good things that are happening, it was just like this friction, like this constant, like I just could not like get out of it. And even just, I couldn't be in the moment. I remember going to the beach, and the whole time I was thinking about my books, and okay, and has an agent emailed me today? Has a publisher emailed me today? Obsessively checking my phone, and to just be in this unhealthy cycle in a lot of ways. I just totally lost my train of thought. Let me backpedal. What was your question?
We were talking about the scripture verse or passage, and you did Moses.
Bless the work of my hands.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. So
no,
sorry.
I just had that a bit ago, and I was like, wait.
That was like the end of the rope. Like I just went down to that trail and there was a dead end. Okay, bring it back.
No,
So
but
my
it's
prayer,
so
though.
true. I'm in the same boat as you.
Yeah.
We're connecting here. Yeah.
There we go. But all that to say, stepping into this season, I've been like, okay, God, for these past 5 years that in so many ways have felt like suffering, even in the abundance have felt the suffering. I'm like, Lord, I just pray that you will give me back those years, that you'll give me back those years when it comes to community, when it comes to experiences, when it comes to peace. And I think for me in this new place of just being like, I just want peace. I just want to be able to rest and just like live life and meet people and experience my story. And so I think for me, I'm like, okay, Lord, I want like, give me back those years when it comes to my life and living life, but then also bless the work of my hands, where I'm like, okay, God, bless the work of my hands when it comes to the stories that have been written and that, curses that comes out in the fall, but also bless the work of my hands when it comes to this new job that I have, bless the work of my hands when it comes to how I'm functioning in the community. And so that's kind of been my prayer for this season of like, okay, give me back these years, bless it. But too, it's like, I think there's a trust in that of being like, okay, I'm trusting that you're already doing it. I'm trusting that like you brought me here for that reason. But yeah, I think that's been my verse, because I just have been like, okay, that's whenever I feel anxiety, I just pray that. But yeah,
I'm going to find that and highlight it, because I am in the exact same boat as you. And it is a massive trust. And I just keep saying, Lord, I trust you wherever you lead, but I'm feeling that friction. And I'm like, I just want that peace. I want to be able to live in the fruition of my work, but also be in a place with community and peace with God, and just feeling like you did when you went to Wyoming, where you're just like, this is my place. That's what I'm looking for right now.
And I think the biggest advice I can give if you're in that season is to make camp in it. Because I think a lot of times, like in Christian culture, when we feel pain, suffering, it's like we want to put this Christian Band-Aid on it and be like, like I can't tell you the amount of friends who are just like, have more faith. And I'm just like, well, the truth is, faith is actually is supernaturally given to us. Yeah. So God gives us faith. Like it says that all throughout scripture, like God is the source of our faith. And so we can't just like magically conjure up more faith.
No.
So it's like people are like, oh, just have more faith. And I was like, well, I'm really feeling these intense feelings, and I know God is good and I know God is trustworthy, but it honestly felt like I couldn't fully validate what I was going through. And so then I kind of had to wrestle with that. I'm like, God is totally okay with us being like, God, I trust you, but this really hurts. And I trust you, but I'm having a hard time trusting you, like help my unbelief kind of situation. Yeah. Like I believe, help my unbelief. And I think too, like when we're feeling that, I think one of the best things we can do is look it in the eyes and just be like, okay, I accept you. Like I'm not going to sweep you under a rug. I'm not going to put this Band-Aid on you. I'm going to acknowledge that these feelings are there and that, that I'm wrestling with this. And it's okay to be messy, because God wants to see that too. So I think that was the biggest thing I learned, was just being like, okay, I'm feeling all these things, or God, I'm having a really hard, to be perfectly honest with you, for the sake of this podcast and for the sake of just being raw and transparent, a couple of weeks before really this job came through, I think it was like the day before, it might've been the day of, I ended up getting like this job offer and figuring this out. I was at that point where I was like, God, if you don't come through, I don't think I wasn't about to walk away from my relationship with the Lord, but I was like, God, I need to know I can trust you. And I was like, in a way, this feels like a toxic relationship. It feels one-sided. I was like, God, I've been putting all my stake in you and doing this. And now I'm feel like I'm literally about to be homeless and no money and no prospects and all those different things. And I was like, God, if you don't come through, I'm like, I don't know how this is going to shape like how I view you, because if you're my provider, if you're the source, I'm like, I need to be able to see that you're driving this ship. Because I'm like, if you're not driving the ship, why am I giving you the steering wheel, And that's the most raw and transparent I could possibly be. But it was at that point where it was like, God, if you don't come through, I don't know how our relationship is going to look on the other side of this. And you know what? God in his goodness knew that. he was okay with hearing that, and he did come through. And now on the flip side of it, it's like, okay, because he's come through and shown me that we are a team, that he is like, we are like, it's not just him and then there's me, like we are together. There's a responsibility for me too in that. I'm like, okay, well, if you're showing up, I have to continue to show up too, because we're in a relationship. It wouldn't be a good friendship if it's a one-sided situation.
No, you have to be in, you have to reciprocate. You can't just have a relationship where you're doing all the work and the other person isn't. It doesn't work.
So, but God chose himself. So I think like being in those places of being like, okay, like I was literally at this, God, I don't know what I'm doing now. Like, I might walk and I love you, but also I don't know if I can put all my eggs in your basket. Yeah. And then to be like, okay, all the eggs are still in your basket. We're a team. We're doing this together. There's a level of responsibility, but we have to confront our mess to get to that point. And God will show up, but we have to like look at our mess in the eyes and be okay with wrestling with certain things. And I think we'll always wrestle with certain topics. There'll always be things that come up in our life where we're like, okay, I'm having a feeling about this. Like I need to figure this out. But yeah, that's my advice when it comes to those hard seasons, is just to make camp in it and look at it.
And it's not about, as well, the whole thing that you were saying about Christianity. They always want to look good, look perfect. Like, walking with the Lord is like walking in a field of sunflowers or something. It's like
you're walking on a beach and there's the footsteps right beside you.
Yes,
and when this one footsteps, he's carrying you, and you're like, huh?
It's like, no. And we forget how many chapters, how many books even are of the prophets, of the kings saying, Lord, I am distraught. I want to kill myself. Like all this stuff. It's okay. And it's even better to say it to God, because he's the one who completely understands and is the only one who can truly pull you out of it and help you in the way that truly restores you back. I mean, I just keep thinking of, isn't it Elijah, when he's like, I'm so done. I can't handle this anymore. And God's just like, you just need to sleep and some food.
I tell people that all the time. I'm like, I just need to sleep and a snack, and it's biblical. Everyone's like, okay, sure. No, but I love that too. I think it's easy because I think we want to put God in a box. I think we want to take like the Bible and frame it in a way that we can understand and that like looks pretty to us, and I think when you're in a relationship, and I think that's something I've learned too, where it's like my relationship is I'm like it's independent of like the religion. Like, I mean, it's part of it. Like I go to church because it's a support and it's a great community, but it was reaching that point of like, okay, I'm not doing this because I don't find my identity in Christianity. I find my identity in God. And so it's been kind of a cool journey there, but it's true. Like, I mean, the Bible it's messy. It's messy. God uses messy people. And I think like reckoning that of being like, okay, I don't have to be perfect. I can be messy with God, and that is totally okay, because God in his goodness like will restore, and he will work on us, and not all lessons are painful. Like sometimes he can work on us gently, and so I mean it's a really cool thing for sure.
And I think that's with any relationship though. If you're having a perfect relationship where you never have a fight or you're always tiptoeing around each other, that's not a true relationship. And so to say you're a Christian, but you're not in this relationship with God, like you can say you're a Christian, but it's that relationship that is the foundation of everything else. You can go to church, you can walk it, but it's just going through the motions. It's not the true relationship that God wants from us and that he talks about in his word.
And I think all relationships have mountain and valleys. And I've had people like older married friends tell me that too, where they're like, your spiritual walk, it's not a flat line. No. There'll be times where you're like on this mountaintop, and there'll be times when you're in this valley, and there's these like ebbs and flows with it. And I think we have to make peace with that too. And that's when we know it's like, okay, like God is consistent, in this. And if we're looking at God directly and not through church or through scripture, but like genuinely, at Lord, and you can see God through scripture, but you know what I mean? Like having this more direct link to him, and to understand that like there's grace in that too, which is really cool. And I've even had friends who've like given me relationship advice where they're like, even when you're in a relationship with another person who's trying to walk with the Lord, like their faith's not always going to look the same too.
No.
So it's like, understanding that whole process. But yeah, it's really interesting. We could probably talk for hours about just that.
We could. We'll have to do like a whole other podcast about it. But for now, because I know we're running out of time, but you're taking a break from writing, but you do have a new book out in October called Curses and Other Buried Things. I finished it this weekend. So I did enjoy it. It was different from your other two books, which I love different. Because you can anticipate what's going to happen really then, because you're keeping us guessing. I'm like, what is she going to come out with next? And this one, it was a lot darker. It had a heavier material, but it also held great sentimental value to you.
Yeah. So with Curses and Other Buried Things, I will say my publisher has been awesome with, they haven't wanted me to get stuck in a certain subgenre in YA. So they've given me the freedom to kind of experiment with some different things and explore some different things. And yeah, I think, Curses by far it's Curses and Other Buried Things. It's a gothic, it's heavier. It, has kind of that, I guess, classic Southern Gothic feel. But when it comes to family dynamics, it's the most personal book I've ever written, because every bit of Southern culture, that's inspired by like my upbringing and like my own family. And then when it comes to the drama, I guess, within the family dynamics, that was all inspired by stuff that's happened in my family. And so for me to I had to dig up my own stuff and look at it for the sake of this book. But one thing that I'm really passionate about is the idea of like breaking generational curses and like generational trauma, and understanding those cycles. And, even growing up in a family, hearing things of like people indirectly saying, oh, like, that's the George family curse, that's a joke, things like that, or things people have said to me like, oh, you're like that because of X, Y, Z, and we carry words with us, like we carry things with us. It has a lot of power. And so when working with this book, I was like, I really want to write this and encourage other people to, to figure out like how to break these generational curses. And really, spoiler alert, like really the way to break generational curses is simply talk about it, like to get it into the open. And I think so many times, like we, especially in families, we sweep things under the rug, when in reality, like we have to look at it. And I think too, when it comes to writing the book, I didn't realize how heavy it would be for me to write, because I thought I had already reckoned with certain things, but it wasn't until I was like in the story and learning about this kind of stuff where things started clicking. We carry trauma from our grandmother, like in our DNA. Like we carry even our grandma's emotions. We carry our mother's experiences with us. We like, there are fears that each of us has that's like not even based on our own experiences. Like that's something that has been given to us. And like even that, I was like, oh my goodness, that makes so much sense for X, Y, Z. Yeah. And then having to instead receive that with anger or shame or whatever, to look at that and be like, you know what, I receive you, but you're not going to determine my future. Like I'm choosing to function not in that. And so it was a really enlightening process. And I think if anything, it taught me to have more compassion too for my family and like family background, and forgive and then just make my own decision of how I'm going to respond to it. And I like to think of it as like you're given a deck of cards in life. Like, you're handed a deck of cards. It has a unique mix of blessings and burdens that are just for you. But is life about the cards? No, it's about how you play the game. It's about our response to what we're handed. And I think it's easy to be resentful about things that bad things that were handed to us in life, when you're like, okay, I can reframe this, that what's been handed to me does not determine where I'm going to go or my future. So yeah, the book is a little bit heavier, but it's the one I'm most proud of. And I'll leave it up to, I guess, the readers to decide what they think is real and what's not real. my parents have read the book. I was surprised that my dad read it, but I think he finished it. So he liked it.
Liked it? Yeah, I was going to
And I was really nervous. But he liked it. So that's been good.
Yeah, that's good when it's their history. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I want to say if anyone reads it, or you should read it, but when you do, unless you don't want a spoiler, even though Caroline kind of said a spoiler, is to read the author's note before you start reading it. Because I remember I'm reading it and I'm just like, where is this going? How's it going? Because I know your faith. But I'm like, it's so dark. There's things going on. I'm just like, is it all curses? How is it a play of witchcraft kind of thing? I was curious at first because I'm like, okay, because Susanna Yon, I think, is the one in the 1800s. And so she's like cursing towns and things. I'm just like, how is this going? But then reading your author's note, it all came together. And now I'm like, okay, now I need to reread it.
Well, I think too, it's like the idea of the curse is not the supernatural thing. Exactly. Like, I think like, there's that folk tale aspect of being like, and I guess it's a little spoiler, but like there's this folk tale aspect of being like, yes, we have this like mystical, fun little thing. And that's just like classic folk tale, but dissecting that more, we curse people. We do, and we carry curses. And I think that was like even the core. So a little, I guess, background. I was in the Okefenokee swamp with my family. We were visiting our family land down there. And I was looking into the swamp water, and it's black, it's glossy. You can only see your reflection. I mean, you can really see your reflection in this dark water. People don't swim in it, but it's like chock full of gators and snapping turtles. And that's why people don't swim in it, because, it bites.
No.
And it kind of hit me where I'm like, we have things that bite that lurk beneath the surface, that we spend our whole life living around it. We see ourselves reflected in it, but there are things that bite, that lurk beneath the surface that we don't address. And that's where the whole idea came from, of like, we sleepwalk through life a lot of times completely unaware of what's going on subconsciously, or like what's going on, like what's lurking beneath the surface, and we have to call it out sometimes. And so the idea of the curse was less a witchcraft or magic, and more about this metaphor of how the things we say to people hold power, but also we give power to things that people say too. We allow the curse to take root. The power of belief is huge, and so I think too, it's a challenge to be careful with our words. When we label someone, when we say something to someone, they can carry that with them their whole life. And so I think there's this exchange of being like, I will not be the curse, but I also won't be the cursor. And choosing to walk in freedom, because free people do free other people. So when we're living in freedom, we're actually silently giving other people the freedom to do the same. So that's kind of where all of that came from, was kind of this challenge, this call to action, really, to, not be the cursor, but also to call out what has been hidden in the depths.
You've changed the book for me now, because when we think of curses, almost straight away we're like, ooh, is this gonna be like a sci-fi thing? Yeah, we're thinking curse. And so that's when I started reading, I was like, but as I'm going through it, I'm like, okay, it's not that. And then as you're speaking, I'm like, wow, okay, it's all coming together. And like I said, I'm gonna have to reread it now. Because
look for those things.
Because it's so true. Because we do curse people, and it's not this form of witchcraft, it's this real thing. And then how do you break through it? And how do you
when we function in belief, things happen. So it's like, and when we believe we're cursed, or when we believe, so it's like if someone's like, oh, you're this, if you believe that, so it's used psychology, it's fulfillment of self-prophecy. So it's, or self-fulfillment of prophecy, where it's like we receive something, we hold it as truth, and we actually end up making it true because of how we're living in it. And so it's this idea of being cursed. It's not supernatural, because even if you read through the book, like you can see how so many things are sparked by characters' decisions because they are believing this about themselves. And so that's what's so crazy, is that if we're walking in something, if we're living in something, like it's going to play out in our life until we can say, you know what, I'm not I see it, I know it's there, but I'm choosing to walk away from it, and that's not going to be my story.
And that's powerful. So everyone that's listening, go and check out curses and other good things. Caroline, thank you for taking the time to be with us. I think it's so important that we realize God's calling on our lives isn't as linear as we might think. Sometimes we must go and walk into something new and greater that's waiting us on the other side that doesn't necessarily have to be in line with what we thought we were expecting or what we had imagined. So I look forward to watching what God does as you settle into your ranch life. And I hope we'll stay in touch beyond this interview.
Of course, we're friends. Of course, we'll stay in touch.
And have
thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
That's me. I send so many voice memos. It's not even funny. I feel bad for everybody.
My best friend and I, we're now calling our voice notes podcast because they're
podcast
15 minutes long.
Oh yeah.
And then we go, it's like the one-sided podcast, and then it goes to the next person. We love it. So do it.
Yeah, the podcast. Awesome. Well, so nice to meet you.
You too.
As I get through the screen.
Well, Curses and Other Buried Things is available now for pre-order. However, if you don't want to wait until October to read one of Caroline George's marvelous novels, head to the description box below for the links to all her books and social media accounts. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, make sure to hit that subscribe button and follow us on social media to stay updated on all the upcoming episodes of Uncancelled Faith. Let's keep the conversation going and continue to break the culture of division which so often separates us from one another. Until next time, God bless.